So when it comes to consuming these carbs as part of a balanced diet, how do we make sure that they're adding to lean muscle mass versus fat on the body? Does it just come down
Yeah,
to
as
the
mentioned,
workouts, or is there another piece or pieces to this?
it is active individuals, but I'll say this: in the Diet Fits trial out of Stanford, which is over a year long with 600 participants, and Gary Taub's group was participating in that research. And he's obviously a proponent of keto diets. They found that once you control for calories and protein, where you put carbs and fats in terms of percentage of total calories didn't matter. And it didn't matter for weight loss, and it didn't matter for glycemic control. And we have a meta-analysis of over 61 studies that was recently performed that showed that carbohydrates anywhere between 15% all the way up to 65% on type 2 diabetics had no differential effect in terms of weight loss, glycemic control, HA1C, all of those markers. And so it does come down to calories first and foremost. If you're in a surplus, then you can potentially gain weight. One of the advantages of going, as I mentioned, low carb is it tends to satiate some people to where they don't eat in a surplus. But it's the calorie deficit. It's just what type of diet allows you to maintain that deficit. Which one seems the least restrictive to you is what's important. So whether some people, they do intermittent fasting and they find that just spontaneously they end up eating less throughout the day. There is some research to suggest that eating a large breakfast that's high in protein makes you less hungry in subsequent meals. So there are some strategies we can apply. The ones I like to use is what you just mentioned. The big strategies are eat more lean protein, eat more fiber, and eat more high satiety foods, and get your 8,000 steps a day. Maybe drink more water with a meal. Those kinds of things can lend themselves to just spontaneously improving your satiety. So you tend to eat less. Sleeping more is a huge one because you get the ghrelin release from lack of sleep, which is a hormone that stimulates hunger. And then just being awake more hours in the day, of course, gives you another opportunity to get hungry and eat. So those are all, and none of those sounded very magical. It's just a toolbox of things that we utilize to kind of help people subconsciously get in front of the hunger cues, because if you're trying to white knuckle your way through weight loss with willpower, you will lose that battle. It's a very difficult road. You got to try and get ahead of it with these other strategies, avoiding highly palatable ultra processed foods, which just again spontaneously cause you to eat more of them, and you end up in that calorie surplus. So all these conversations that we have about carbs and fats and percentages, etc., they're pretty equal in most of these highly palatable foods. When you think of cake or donuts or any of those, ice cream, they're both high in fat and carbohydrates. It's not one or the other. And salt, it's just that umami. It's that mix of very palatable food that just causes you to take 3 or 4 more bites or eat the whole can or carton. That's the concern. Carbohydrates don't need to be demonized. The reason I like them, if we're having this discussion about athletes, is because they lend themselves better for performance. Fats are important for health. You need a minimal amount, but beyond that, which provides you a health benefit, doesn't give you an added performance benefit, but the carbohydrates can. That's why I utilize those in these diets.
So for somebody who is incorporating exercise, either weightlifting or cardio or whatever it is, do you recommend to them the days when they're going to be pushing it harder in the gym or on the track to include more carbs on those days? Or is
They
it kind
certainly
of just
can.
more zoomed out big picture and in looking at each day very similar?
You kind of put this into a hierarchy. I said calories are king, and then protein, the total amount of protein for the day. The International Society of Sports Nutrition would like to see you get at least 3, and they recommend 4 evenly spaced feedings for athletes because there's no mechanism to store protein in the body. And so they want to see protein boluses coming in periodically throughout the day. And then you get down to, possibly meal timing. But again, each of these has a smaller and smaller impact on overall performance and overall weight loss. But it can be a factor. You might want to load most of your carbs around the training bout. That certainly can be beneficial for people as they get to be an advanced athlete. And so that is a strategy that will employ. I think the meaningfulness of it is small in comparison to the other things we mentioned, calories and protein in particular.
And reading your book, the other time I know you're a fan of carbs is before bed and helping with sleep. And this ties into what you were just talking about a few minutes ago, getting enough sleep. So talk about how somebody can use that to their advantage to get those calories in if they're trying to up their weight, plus also use them to their advantage to get a better sleep.
Yeah. Now, in terms of controlling for calories and protein, when you eat doesn't seem to be all that big of a deal if you control for calories and protein. As mentioned earlier, when you have a big breakfast, you tend to be less hungry later in the day. So that might be a strategy that ultimately spontaneously causes you to eat less, but it's the eating less that leads to the weight loss, not the timing of the meal necessarily. So, same thing with eating high satiety foods. If you overeat high satiety foods, you can still gain weight as long as you maintain the calorie deficit. I hope that makes sense. But yes, before bed, not too soon before bed, having a little bit of carbohydrates. What we see is that folks who go to bed with no glycogen, now the brain wants glycogen during the night, and so it will get its glycogen. It'll increase cortisol and then cause the liver to break down and release glucose into the bloodstream so that it can fuel on that. And so, I've been doing blood tests for 25 years on myself, well over 100 of them throughout my career on almost a monthly basis when I was competing at my peak. And then hundreds and hundreds of athletes that I've done blood tests on over the years. Uh, and sometimes when I come across keto athletes, I'll see an elevated fasting cortisol in the morning and an elevated fasted glucose in the morning, both of which can contribute to poor sleep potentially. And it's hard to advise those folks to throw in a little bit of fruit with their dinner because, as you say, as people get pretty religious about their diet practices. So, but it certainly can help.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
Oranges are very high on the satiety index, as are potatoes. To be honest, boiled potatoes I have in all of my weight loss clients' diets because they're really high on the satiety index. Carbohydrates don't need to be demonized. The reason I like them, if we're having this discussion about athletes, is because they